All right, everybody, we are back for another edition of Lawfare. May it please the viewers, I'm Rich Schoenstein. Welcome to So Sue Me. I have a super panel that I have assembled here to go over some new defamation litigation filings and maybe some other stuff. But let me start by introducing our panel. I'm going to go this week in pure old-fashioned alphabetical order. We have with us the great Terri Austin, an attorney and legal analyst, and I might say TV personality. You see her frequently on the Law and Crime Network, News Nation, other places, and I understand also these days a producer of true crime content. Hi, Terri, how are you?
Great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Second, alphabetically only, Marie Pereira. Marie is a former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, domestic violence victim advocate. She's the founder of the Haiti Immigration Project, and you can see Marie about everywhere: Court TV, NBC, Fox, Scripps, Pix 11, News 12, offering legal commentary and her great takes on all legal matters. Marie, thank you for joining us. And last, but only alphabetically last, Joe Richardson.
Story of my life.
Attorney. Well, you wouldn't be last to Schoenstein, but you're an attorney, racial and economic justice practice group head at the McCune Law Group, and a frequent speaker on legal and ethical responsibility and TV commentator. Welcome, everybody. Did I leave anything out of your resumes you want to share?
I do whatever my wife tells me.
That's a very good plan. That is a very good plan. All right. So we do this sort of legal analyst, sort of game show style. We bring up a few legal topics. I'm going to ask you each some questions. We're going to have some conversation. We're going to go topic to topic to topic. And then at the end, I am going to arbitrarily declare a winner. There's a very complicated point system that I do, but it only involves fingers and toes. I do not even have a calculator.
Oh my God,
Okay.
I didn't know that part about there's a winner at the end. I feel pressured now.
No, don't. No,
Well,
we're
let
all.
me alleviate your pressure by telling you this, Marie. The winner receives nothing. The losers receive nothing. Nobody receives anything, so not much pressure. So, do you guys know who these people are? Who can name these people from left to right, top to bottom? Anybody?
Those are folks from the Karen Reed trial. And I would say that Brian Higgins is at the bottom right. At the top left, that might be Jennifer McCabe. I think that is Colin Albert at the bottom left. The top right, not sure. In the middle is Karen on the left.
Yeah.
And and on the right is who's on the right there?
So first of all, you're 3 for 3. The guy you missed on the top right is Brian Albert.
Oh, that is Brian Albert.
Brian Albert, who owned the home outside of which John O'Keefe was found dead in the snow.
Correct.
That is Karen Reed. Here's there's Karen Reed in her victory / running for political office formation. And there's a better picture of Karen Reed and Aidan Carney. And I was lambasted appropriately because the last thing I put out on this, I mispronounced his name and kept saying Kearney. And I gather the correct pronunciation is Carney. He also pronounces it Turtleboy. So, next question. What do all 6 of those people have in common now, even more than they had in common a week and a half ago?
A defamation lawsuit.
They're in litigation. Yeah.
They are in litigation. They are in civil litigation with each other. Jen McCabe, Brian Albert, Colin Albert, and Brian Higgins have filed a defamation lawsuit against Karen Reed and Turtleboy. So I have some questions about this. Terri, have you read that complaint?
Yes, I have read the complaint, and I followed the trial while it was occurring. So
what do you think of the complaint? What do you think of the claims that are being brought?
I think that it's going to be really hard to prevail in that complaint, particularly because this was all during litigation, and there's this litigation privilege, so that accusations being made back and forth during litigations are generally protected. So the fact that we have plaintiffs, Jennifer McCabe, Brian Albert, I guess Colin Albert, who is Brian's nephew, as I recall, and Brian Higgins, they're all suing Karen Reed and Turtleboy, and it's based on what was said during trial. And so what was said during trial by Karen was her defense. And when you're in litigation, you are allowed to have a defense. And so I think it's going to be very difficult in a defamation suit to show that there was some sort of falsity and that it was made against these folks and that it was publicized and that it caused harm to their reputation. I think it's going to be hard to show that when, in fact, Karen Reed and even Turtleboy can say that all of these allegations were made in court and that there's this litigation protection that they have because of that. So I think it's going to be a hard hill to climb. I don't think it's totally meritless, but it's going to be particularly difficult as it relates to Karen Reed. Maybe a little less difficult as it relates to Kearney.
Right, because Carney wasn't a defendant in a criminal case at the time he was doing it. He was doing it on his own. Joe Richardson, put on your plaintiff's hat. Do you have an answer to those arguments Terri makes?
Yeah, I was thinking about, how do you get around the fact that there's a litigation privilege and all of this really kind of occurred in the context of the case, of which there were two. They took two shots at the apple here, and really, if anybody, could argue about, being worse off because of some things being said, I would think that Karen Reed might be the one to do that. So I'm thinking, well, maybe, this podcast that they're doing is something that, whether in timing, being after the trials or between the trials, or something that falls outside of litigation privilege. The only way for them to do it is to have it fall outside of the litigation privilege. So if I'm putting on that hat, I'm going to say that these things did not have to be said in this context. The litigation is over. They're still saying things. I would have to have it fall outside of the criminal law litigation itself. Now, putting Terry's hat back on, it makes it's still very, very hard, because at the end of the day, one of the defenses you have is opinion. People have an opinion about these true crime cases. You know what I mean? Karen Reed is probably subject to as much as they are, right? I'm not saying I'm a fan of either one, just because some people have an opinion about it, and because of the consumption and all of the things that people can do, they can find out where you live. They can say vile things online, things like that. Those then in and of themselves do not mean that this was defamatory or that it came out from under the privilege where it would otherwise be defamatory. So I've certainly still got a hill to climb, but I've got to say that somehow, some way, the things that were said fell outside of the litigation privilege.
Marie, what do you have to say about it?
Know that I 100% agree with the litigation privilege, because they're also accusing, especially Turtleboy, of intentionally posting information about where the witnesses lived and promoting violence against the witnesses. And they're saying that the attorneys for Karen Reed, while they allowed Turtleboy to throw the rocks that created a situation where the people not on the Karen Reed side were being threatened, etc., they actually were communicating with him via text and saying, "Way to go, you did that right," while at the same time showing up in court like choir boys saying, "I don't know where all this hate is coming from. I don't know anything about this." So it does make the defendants, right, look bad, especially the attorneys who should know better, of inciting violence even with litigation privilege against your opponents. So it's, when I read it and I saw that they had text messages actually from one of Karen Reed's attorneys to Turtleboy saying, "Yes, you did exactly right," And then in court, he was claiming, I don't know what happened. We don't have anything to do with this. It just made them look really shitty and unethical to me.
Yeah, so I think that the case will survive a motion to dismiss. And, Terry, you raise all the right arguments, but to me, the litigation argument is sure, Karen Reed had an absolute right to say in that courtroom anything she wanted. And her attorneys had an absolute right to put on any defense they wanted. But that complaint alleges that they coordinated an out of courtroom public assault
They
on
did.
people
They did.
using Turtleboy. And the
Mhm.
complaint very carefully sets forth instances where Turtleboy went on his podcast and said, "This is not my opinion. This is a fact. This is a fact that these people did this thing," and presented it as he was as a journalist presenting a factual argument.
And you know
So
what, Richard? What I would say is when this trial occurs, it will be a line by line, a comment by comment sort of presentation of evidence, because that is the only way you are going to be able to determine whether or not these are facts or is it an opinion. And I think, Joe, you hit it on the head when you said, and Richard, you also said that it depends on where the statement was made. If it's in court, yes, there's protection there. And generally speaking, the overall protection of opinion still exists inside and outside of court, frankly. But I do think that much is going to depend on who said it, when they said it, where were they, what was the context. And that is what is going to determine line by line whether or not there was defamation. If you remember the Johnny Depp trial where the two sides were claiming defamation, they literally went line by line in the article. Here it's going to be the same. Where did Carney make these statements? Where did Karen Reed make these statements? Were these just statements that they were making to defend the lawsuit at the time, or both of the lawsuits, as Joe correctly pointed out? There were two of them. Or was this above and beyond? I mean, as you say, Marie, is it something that is going on behind the scenes with the attorneys and they are trying to defame these individuals? And the other thing I'll say here is they're going to have to prove damages. You can't just say, I don't like what you said. You really defamed me. You harmed my reputation. Where are the damages? And I think that is oftentimes the hardest part of a defamation case, where you have to quantify, yes, my reputation was hurt. I lost clients, and this was the amount of compensation that I lost based on that. So that's the hardest part of this case.
yeah, so that's why they've alleged defamation per se, because they were been accused, according to the complaint, of participating in murder, which would be a per se defamatory act. So you could get through with what we call nominal damages. What's interesting about this discussion is we're talking about the statements themselves. And when you think about it, the Johnny Depp case was one article, right? The Alex Jones case was a couple of podcast appearances. This is hundreds. Carney did hundreds of podcasts on this topic.
Yeah.
And written articles and posts on social media. And so when you talk about going line by line, Joe, would this trial ever end?
Well, I think that the positive motions are going to be important in terms of what ends up surviving to get to trial, and then pre-trial motions about what can come in and what can't. As much of that as you can get decided, you're going to want to get decided. But of course, if I'm plaintiff, I'm going to want all that stuff to come in because I'm saying all of these things are issues of fact. In my world, I really try to get through my presentation more sooner than later. Because in a long, long trial, whoever's ahead at the end of evidence typically wins. That's my thing. Good, bad, or indifferent, fantastic, wheels of justice are spinning the right way or not. I just think it's very, very hard after 8-9 weeks of testimony to be sure that your jury is as sharp and as attentive in the jury room as it needs to be. That's not to say that the presentation of evidence is wasted time, but I think anytime you can't make your case as brief as possible, and you really make it hard for them to go through this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing, I think that that's going to favor whoever's ahead at the close of evidence.
One thing I will say, Richard, I also think while plaintiffs are trying to claim that this is defamation per se, and I think charging someone or claiming that someone murdered another person, that would be defamation per se. But again, I think going line by line is the cover up. And that's one of the claims that the Reed and Carney said, oh, this is a cover up. They're covering up. Is that defamation per se? Is that so extreme? Is that accusing someone of a serious crime? I think they're going to go line by line on what is defamation per se also. So I'm not putting all of the statements in that category necessarily. I think that plaintiffs want that. I'm not certain that that's what the court is going to determine.
Very good point. Marie, here's my question for you. So it's funny, we're having this whole discussion. We haven't talked yet about truth. The ultimate defense in a defamation case is truth, right? And if they can establish, if these defendants can establish that McCabe and the Alberts and Higgins were indeed partially responsible or responsible for the death of John O'Keefe, they would have a truth defense. Now, I believe that the criminal cases did not resolve the question of who killed him or how he died, because all the criminal case resolved is that the prosecution could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Karen Reed did it. Now you have a civil case where it will be all of the suspects going against each other, side versus side. And my theorem is that that is actually a better vehicle to determine the truth once and for all. What do you think about that?
I was just thinking the exact same thing. I said, okay, we're accusing a lot of people of saying defamatory things per se, right? But I think the outcome of the case, that's where I disagree with you slightly, works in favor of the defendants. Because why would someone who did it be found guilty only of basically drunk driving? It was because there were so many issues with the case that justified all of the third party culprit blame throwing around. It justified a conspiracy, and it justified that it was a talk, right? And when you're talking about damages, because I didn't get to answer in that question, it's all about the money. They have a lot of separate defendants with separate deep pockets, right? I don't think that Turtleboy has a deep pocket. So they can actually come back and say, yes, there are a little bit of damages, but it's Turtleboy that has the most lean pockets, in my opinion. So if they're looking for damages, they need to come up with a scenario where the verdict is in for the deep pocket lawyer people. Because
Well,
you
they're
could
not
get,
even, yeah,
yeah.
haven't even sued the lawyers. I mean, there's this giant verdict against Alex Jones that no one's been able to collect because even he doesn't have that kind of money. I think the hope is that Karen Reed and Aidan Carney have some sort of rights deals worked out that might be lucrative that one could get a hold of if they were to prevail. But I also think that these plaintiffs just want to clear their names, right? Right. Because in this defamation kind of lawsuit, and again, hearkening back to Johnny Depp, he wasn't in it for the money. He wanted to make a public record that he hadn't done wrong and save his film career. And these people want to clear their names. So we'll see if they're able to do that.
Well, the verdict did not clear their names. They weren't defendants, of course, but I think the verdict itself spoke volumes as to conspiracy. They didn't put their finger on exactly who, but something went wrong there, because if the jurors believe all of the facts that were presented, then the verdict would not just have come out something related to her drinking too much. They didn't believe anyone in law enforcement, and that's what happened there. And I think that verdict is going to common sense say, well, were those people really lying? Because look at what happened. The jurors didn't even believe it.
All right. Well, it's good. We're going to be talking about these cases for a long time. You know, there's also wrongful death litigation pending, and these civil cases, as you all know, go on forever and ever. So will be following them. Let's talk about more defamation litigation. You guys know I love defamation litigation.
So do
I can
I.
see that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So here we got this guy. Who's this guy?
Kash
Kash Patel.
life of the party Patel.
This is Kash Patel. He is indeed the director of the FBI.
Fun coordinator.
And let me put up one other thing. All right. So here's his lawsuit filed in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. By the way, it's interesting. Have you guys all read this complaint too?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Patel, they're both defamation complaints that we're talking about, Patel and Karen Reed. Patel's got basically an 18-page complaint, and it has just one cause of action for defamation and defamation per se. This is based on a report in The Atlantic that he is frequently intoxicated and it is interfering with his ability. By contrast, the complaint in the Karen Reed case, which was filed in state court in Massachusetts, is 50 pages long. And in addition to defamation, they bring a total of 14 causes of action for all kinds of things: intentional infliction of emotional distress, Massachusetts Trade Practices Act. So, Joe, which complaint did you like better? And can you a little bit talk about the difference presented by the fact that Kash is a public figure?
Yeah, I mean, interesting. Kash Patel's complaint is like must read, I would guess it wouldn't be TV. I guess it would be must read library reading. It's interesting because there's a couple defenses here, right? Truth is always a defense in defamation, but to your point related to a public figure, actually mere negligence would be a defense as well. So this is a problem. This case is particularly interesting because whereas in the other case that we talked about, we aren't dealing with a public figure. Here, you actually are dealing with a public figure, and therefore the standard is much higher in order to show actionable defamation. Specifically, it has to be actual malice. So you really have to intend to do this person wrong. You have to actually have clear and convincing evidence, typically, that they know that what they're saying is false, or that there's reckless disregard for the truth, or a lack of concern about truth or falsity as demonstrated by what it is that they present. So it's a much higher standard because you're dealing with a public figure, the head of the FBI that's in the 10-year term, that's on the tube all the time and working for Donald Trump is certainly going to be a public figure. And the problem that he has is, among others, aside from the fact that The Atlantic is not a podcast that potentially shot from the hip, or an individual that misspoke and said the wrong thing, I am certain they dotted their I's and crossed their T's before they ran this story. And so I think they're going to be much harder to prove against because, among other things, it's pretty foreseeable. This is not out of the realm of possibility at all, to say the least, that Kash Patel, who was, flying the government planes over to the Olympics and was hammered with people on the team publicly, this perception that he's a drunkard is not happening in a vacuum. And so tell a different narrative. I think going all the way through, that's going to be a problem for him if he doesn't have Donald Trump's support, because Donald Trump doesn't even like drunks, even though he appoints them in the first instance. We'll talk about that some other time. So he might not make it.
That's your opinion, Joe.
Yeah, that's my opinion. That's very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So we don't actually know. Nobody here knows if Kash Patel has a drinking problem.
Opinion.
People that are purported heavy drinkers, that is not Donald Trump's jam. And so he's going to have a problem because, based on being a public figure, he has to show actual malice where they know that they're telling a lie or there's reckless disregard for the truth. And if he's not able to do that, he's not going to be able to get to that actual malice standard, not only because defense is a truth, but as a defense, but in this case, effectively, so is negligence. If they accidentally got it wrong, then they don't get it because he's a public figure, and that's not
Assuming they
malice.
made an adequate investigation.
Yep.
I'm gonna go. Let me go to Marie next. So I'm interested a little bit in what you think the public perception of this is. Here's the head of the FBI. He gets criticized all the time for all kinds of things because he's the head of the FBI. Like, rightly or wrongly, the head of the FBI gets criticized. Do you want the head of your FBI pursuing civil litigation? Do you think that's a good move for him?
Think it's a good move for him because, like Joe said, the Atlantic is not some rag, right? So if they said it and they stand on 10 toes, they have the receipts. Trust me on that, right? So if they're saying that, publicly he's been not a drunkard, but he drinks quite a bit, it's not a good look. He looks unprofessional. I'm quite sure everybody knows who he is. He's a public figure, and people have little videos of him. So him, opening up a can of worms that's going to force his opponents to show the receipts without even divulging their source is a danger because people are already questioning his qualifications. How did he even get there? He didn't have a strong background in law enforcement. Yes, he's an attorney and he was a public defender, etc. But they feel like the only reason why he got this job is because he was a Donald Trump supporter, loyalist, and a sycophant, right? So all of these things are going to come out because if a notable source like that is saying those things, where there's smoke, there's fire, and they have the receipts. And if you force them to show the receipts, it's not a good look for anyone's administration.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's right. Also, he's modeling behavior of his boss, who's very successful at using civil litigation. He was very successful using it to accomplish his business goals, and he's very successful using it to accomplish political goals, even if sometimes you look at the cases and you're like, he sued CBS for what? What? But it still seems to work out. A question for you, Terri, because you talked about damages on the Karen Reed defamation suit. What did you think about the damages allegations in this one?
Well, I think, first of all, the amount, the 250 million, is quite high. And I think, the burden here is, I believe in a defamation suit, it's going to be a preponderance versus the clear and convincing. But beyond that, I think he's going to have to show that he has been damaged, that his reputation has been damaged, that this has cost him money. And I don't see it, actually, because this is part of his job. You said it earlier, Richard. He is the head of the FBI. They are going to be attacked, and he is not going to be able, in my opinion, to quantify how this has hurt him as far as the job is concerned. Now, he might lose his job, and he might lose his job because of this fact that he has been drinking. Now, we do know that Donald Trump, this is probably the one quality that I admire. He doesn't drink. I think that shows a lot of discipline, and he doesn't like it when people around him, people that are in his administration, are showing poor judgment in that regard, and he might lose his job. So if he is able to prove in this lawsuit, Kash Patel, that is, that he is losing his job based on these allegations, that the people at the Atlantic, particularly, Sarah Fitzpatrick and the editor and everyone else at the Atlantic, did not research what they were doing, that this was actual malice, that they cannot corroborate these stories. If he can prove all of that, then, I think he is going to prevail. But I think it's going to be very, very difficult to prove all of that. I don't think he can meet his burden. And obviously, I think as a public figure, the press has every right under, the Constitution, freedom of the press. Under the Sullivan case, they have every single right to say that they have these sources, not name the sources, but to be able to corroborate those facts. And I think they will be able to do it. We've seen other pieces of information from Sarah Fitzpatrick. She's an award-winning journalist. And she has been able in the past to corroborate. They have a legal department. They've checked this all out. So I think this is going to be, at the end of the day, a very hard suit for Patel to prevail on. And I think the damages are going to be particularly difficult for him to substantiate.
Yeah, and this is a new development I just saw. He had brought a defamation action in Houston against Frank Figluzzi, who is a commentator on Morning Joe, and had said on Morning Joe that Patel had been visible at nightclubs far more often than he has been on the 7th floor of the Hoover Building. And Patel sued him for defamation, and that lawsuit was dismissed because the alleged comment was pure hyperbole, right? He wasn't actually trying to count appearances at nightclubs. I think that's a different scenario because the Atlantic article purports to be very fact specific. It talks about specific instances. It talks about actions taken by his staff. It's got that whole allegation about him freaking out because he couldn't get on his computer, that his allegations that they had to move meetings because he couldn't get up in time. So I don't think the Atlantic has a hyperbole defense.
Agreed.
But I do think Joe's argument about actual malice is very strong. Hard to show that the Atlantic, who stands behind this reporting, didn't do an adequate job before they put out a story.
Actual malice plus the truth. Because again, if they said it, they have the receipts, little secret recordings. People like, oh, isn't that Kash? And he's like, ow, he's outside. It's not a good look.
Well, it's not so secret. We saw him chugging a beer with the hockey team.
Okay.
Right. That's what's amazing. I mean, everybody can foresee this. We're reading that article going, I can believe
And
that.
he was on duty at that time. So it'd be one thing if
Right.
that was separate and apart. He was actually on duty at that time. So,
But you know
We
what?
also-
I could see where him constantly filing cases against people, even if it's getting dismissed for every little thing, even where he doesn't meet the elements or the standards of proof, it's still a situation where people will be discouraged from even having his name in their mouth. Because for every case that's litigated, people are spending money to hire lawyers, big billable hours. These civil attorneys like Rich with the fabulous hair, they don't come cheap. You know what I'm saying? So
The hair product is very expensive.
I'm telling you. So for that alone, it'll discourage people from talking about him, because I'm not going to say nothing, because before you know it, that brother's going to sue me. So if that's all that comes out of it, even a dismissed case requires biddable hours from an attorney.
But
And,
maybe as
you
to a
know-
smaller defendant, that's more true, right?
Maybe.
But the Atlantics of the world,
Maybe.
I don't know that they're as worried about that. He's counting on the Trump effect. He's hoping these guys roll over and go over in a ball very, very quickly. And if they don't do that, particularly for those of us that are taking it over under on how long he'll be in his job, I was saying last week, I'd give him maybe 2 months, soaking wet. He's not a powerful FBI
That's right.
guy.
I
right?
agree with you.
And so
I
he's in
agree with-
trouble anyway. So unless this happens very quickly, it's not nothing. It's
Because
not
you're
gonna go
right.
anywhere.
One thing about Donald Trump, right? He doesn't play. Don't bring stinky stuff to his space. With your own, like, whatever you got going on, don't bring it over here. I have enough issues without having to worry about one. I nominated you. Yes, you were confirmed by the Senate, but you really didn't have all the credentials. I did you a solid. You need to just be quiet, stay right over there, stop with the bullshit. I don't need it. So yeah, he could any minute be fired on Truth Social.
Right.
Okay?
That's
With
it.
no notice.
Cut him
Kash
away in a second
Patel,
without even thinking
he's-
about it. He's got no
Exactly.
loyalty. Yeah.
because he don't play about that. Don't bring any more aggravation to his aggravation plate already. Yeah.
All right. You guys are excellent. We've covered a lot. But before I leave you, I have a final question for you, and then everyone can make a closing argument if
Yeah.
they like. So here's my question of the week. What is your favorite movie about lawyers or favorite movie lawyer? Marie.
My gosh, I'm drawing a blank. My favorite movie lawyer? Why can't I think of anyone? Perry Mason.
Perry Mason
Perry
is an
Mason. I
excellent
used to
choice.
watch Perry Mason when I was little. When I first came to this country from Haiti, and I was a little kid and I learned English, I used to love how you were on pins and needles until the end, and he got everyone to admit the truth at the end. The witness on the stand is like, okay, I did it. I like the way he was able to extract truths from people, and it kept you in suspense until the end. So Perry Mason, that's my man. Yes.
Okay. Joe?
On the TV side, it would be Matlock. He had this incredible way of solving the case every time by 8:58 p.m. On the movie side, it would be A Few Good Men. Every time I'm getting ready to go to trial, I run A Few Good Men and I watch Tom Cruise go through his paces, hanging out with his bat, walking, doing circles around the room. And it represents the difficulty in practicing where you need a little help. You do all your presentation, but you got to be a little lucky to have somebody say something that you need to be said. And so it's something that I can really get. It helps me really get in character for trying a case.
Terry?
Was going to say A Few Good Men, and the reason that gets me really going is because when Jack Nicholson says you can't handle the truth, I do believe Tom Cruise comes back and, this is exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to get the witness upset and riled, and he got the answer that he wanted. I mean, in terms of, lawyers that I admire, I think people like, what's the name of the attorney for Johnny Cochran for O.J. Simpson, even though, the outcome was whatever. I do believe that without showing what I really feel, I do believe when you have that sort of presence and you set the bar for other attorneys, particularly Black attorneys, frankly, to go out, start your own practice and really have these high profile cases that I think paves the way for a lot of young attorneys coming up and trying to make a statement in this world.
All right. Excellent. Excellent choices all around. So I give everybody the opportunity to make a closing argument about defamation litigation or anything else they want. We're going to reverse the order from opening arguments. That puts you on the spot, Mr. Richardson.
Thanks much. Why can't my last name be Austin? But anyway, or I'd take Everett right now. Well, as it pertains to defamation, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you might not like my client. You might not like what happened. However, I must say that if there's a couple defenses here. One is truth, okay? And we can show that there's truth. What was said was well researched. It was well thought out. And there are receipts here. But even if I don't have truth, negligence is another one because it's well thought out, because it's well said, because it's well researched. You'll have negligence at best, if anything. And therefore, there's absolutely no malice. And because of that, Mr. Patel should not be here at all. And we're hoping that you do the right thing in that regard.
Marie?
I would say in non-big lawyer terms so the jury understands. If you can't stand the heat, then stay out of the public kitchen. At the end of the day, you're a public figure. You out here running these streets. You're at bars. You're seen drinking. You're Kash Patel. So you can't come here and say people don't have the right to say anything about you. Once you put yourself out there, be ready for public scrutiny. There's no malice here. There's definitely no defamation per se. You did what you did. And we have the receipts to show it. You're a public figure. If you don't like being under the public light, then go inside and stop playing and showing your ass out here on these streets. Thank you.
That was pretty good. Terri?
Can I take that one and do that instead?
No, I would say that here, being a public figure is a very high burden. Actual malice is very difficult to prove. And in the case that Patel is bringing, you have The Atlantic. They are a reputable organization. All of the comments that were made in this article were clearly vetted. And the press has a right to speak. And here we need to look at these public figures. We need to make statements so the community at large can understand what's going on. You cannot silence the press. And if you did that, you would harm the United States, you'd harm all of the communities in the United States. And we have to allow this type of conversation to occur in the public space. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we must find that this case must be dismissed. There is no defamation, and the Atlantic had every right to say what they said.
All right, there you have it. Excellent job, everybody. I've contacted our official auditors to go over the scores, and our winner this week is Marie Pereira.
All right.
So,
Wow!
I found all of your arguments to be quite compelling and good and well reasoned. Marie's just adds a little salt. I have
No
to
doubt
decide if
about
I
it.
have to beep anything.
I
No
call it
doubt
my
about it.
street analysis.
Well done. Well done.
Because I'm
So
out
you wanna
here in
do
these
that.
streets.
You gotta
Kudos.
make the good. You gotta make the good arguments. You also, you guys know, you gotta get the jury's attention. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. These defamation cases will be around a long time, so we can talk about them. We will be back next week. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to have a new panel next week. If you're out there and you're a legal analyst and you're interested in joining this panel, you know how to find me, or you should know how to find me. I mean, it's not that hard. And if you just want to keep watching this kind of stuff, like, subscribe, do all of that. If you have any objections to our content, that's what the comments are for. You can make your objections in comment form, and I scroll through them. God help me, I scroll through them. So we will be back soon. For now, we are adjourned.